Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. It is tough to pay attention with this machine jerking me off right now.
Oh, yeah. Jason referencing one of the interesting aspects of this film that we're about to discuss. And actually, as much as we're laughing about that very specific aspect, I think will relate to something kind of relevant that I want to really get into on this film. But anyway, before we
get the fact that I'm not lonely anymore.
Right. Yeah, there you go. In this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the films of 1971. And as always, we pick out a debut feature from a major filmmaker to discuss. And in 1971, two of the most influential, consequential, talented, successful, however you want to put it, filmmakers of the last 50 years both made their debuts. So we're doing two episodes on debut features, and we are starting with George Lucas and his film THX 1138.
And here's a hint, the other guy very closely entwined with him.
Indeed, and I think that's another reason maybe why we decided to do both of them. And this film, kind of an interesting, uncharacteristic in some ways debut from George Lucas, this very minimalist, kind of artsy sci-fi movie that I think if you look at this, you can see some elements that carried forward into the Star Wars movies, but they're very different sorts of sci-fi than this. And if you've seen Star Wars or, any number of the Star Wars movies that Lucas made later, this is not what you would expect as an early sort of trial run or whatever for his sci-fi ambitions.
Well, I would say the only film of his that would be uncharacteristic would be the one that he made after this, that film.
American Graffiti?
Yeah, American Graffiti, the name that escaped me. I was like, American Gigolo, American History X. Nope, those aren't it.
So many of them.
Ooh, George Lucas's American History X. Now that would be something. So, that's a totally different movie. This, I do think you could see those things. But I also think that because this was an American Zoetrope production and this was part of Coppola's 7-picture deal with Warner Brothers, that you could see some of those Coppola imprints on this thing.
Yeah, I mean, and part of that deal, which didn't really work out too well overall, was that Coppola wanted to find these artistically ambitious young filmmakers and help promote them. And this is an expansion of George Lucas's student film that he made while he was at USC in 1967 called Electronic Labyrinth, THX 1138 4EB, which is even more abstract, far more abstract, to the point where I didn't even really catch much about any dialogue really or anything while watching it.
Oh, you watched the short?
I did, yeah.
That's good. I was trying to get to it, but I did.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's 15 minutes long, and it's basically just the chase that we see kind of at the end of this movie when THX, played by Robert Duvall in the feature film, has escaped the totalitarian whatnot and is trying to run away from their city, and the government whatevers are chasing him. That's basically, it's just a long chase scene, but it's full of this distorted overlapping dialogue as all the various functionaries are kind of communicating to each other about how they're going to track the guy down. You can barely make out what people are saying. It's very abstracted. And it's, obviously much, much, much lower budget. And you can see the little, handwritten things on people's costumes and stuff. But it's even, you think this movie is kind of artsy or experimental or avant-garde. That movie is even more so.
Well, he was a kid. He was a student. Yeah, you can do that as a student. So speaking of which, Josh, remind me to tell you my story about this film when I was a student at some point in time.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that shortly, I think.
That was a tease.
Coming up. But again, this film and that overall project of Coppola's, like a lot of very ambitious things that Coppola attempted in the 70s and 80s, kind of was a failure. And I don't think he made 7 films related to that deal. I don't even know how many other than this actually were released. But in its initial release in 1971, this film was not successful. And not only that, but the studio took it away from Lucas, cut like 5 minutes out of it, released it in theaters in 1971 when it grossed $945,000 on its budget of like $778,000. So a very small margin, was considered a failure. It was only in 1977, after Star Wars had become a massive hit, that this was restored to Lucas's, the extra few minutes were restored from Lucas's original cut, and it was released in theaters again. And at that point, it grossed 2.4 million, which is still not a huge amount compared to what Star Wars made, but obviously it was a much, of much greater interest to the general public to see, hey, here's what the Star Wars guy was doing before.
Yeah, and also would be cool to try. I mean, well, they knew what he was doing before because American Graffiti was a huge
True,
hit, so.
True. Yeah,
but
that
before
is true.
That, so.
Yeah, and in the sci-fi realm before, because as you said, American Graffiti, a very different non-sci-fi story, just kind of a ensemble comedy. Although I do think that in a way, the sort of warmth and almost corniness of American Graffiti is closer to Star Wars than the tone.
I think American Graffiti is my favorite George Lucas movie. I'm putting that out there right now.
All right. So. I haven't seen it in a while, but I think I liked it. I saw it at a drive-in, actually.
That's a perfect place to see it.
Yeah.
So. But again, remember, he didn't direct Empire or Jedi.
True. I mean, he's heavily involved, and we talked about this in our episode on Empire Strikes Back, in those films, and of course did direct the prequels. So this did get some good response from critics, though. It was nominated for the Fapresky Prize at the 1971 Cannes Film Festival, which is the prize given out by the International Association of Film Critics there. So it didn't win, but still they were positive about it. And critics at the time, again, this is for the 1971 release, were somewhat positive, or at least positive about visuals of this film, which I don't know how you guys feel, but I would agree are probably its greatest strength. So Roger Ebert said, "The movie's strength is not in its story, but in its unsettling and weirdly effective visual and sound style. The story is standard sci-fi stuff. 5 centuries in the future, mankind inhabits vast underground cities, which are programmed by computers and policed by robots. None of this is very original, and the whole business of love versus state is out of Orwell and countless lesser writers. But Lucas doesn't seem to have been very concerned with his plot anyway. The subterranean laboratories, apartments, and corridors in THX 1138 have a blinding white porcelain sameness, and the characters seem to inhabit the future's most spectacular and sanitary bathroom fixtures. THX 1138 suffers somewhat from its simple storyline, but as a work of visual imagination, it's special, and as haunting as parts of 2001: A Space Odyssey, Silent Running, and The Andromeda Strain."
Nope.
Okay.
I would also agree that, when you think of Lucas, if you do the research, right, you think of Joseph Campbell, the Myth of the Mask, and his work with Bill Moyers and all that stuff. And I was so bored with the dialogue in this movie. I thought it was we just talked about Fiddler on the Roof being 3 hours, and it was like a quick 3 hours. This was a very long hour and a half for me.
Yeah, I wasn't as bored with it as you were, but I do think it gets very repetitive, especially in the sequence where THX and his sort of rival SEN, played by Donald Pleasence, are trapped in this prison that's just like a big white empty space. And there's a lot of kind of talking in circles at that point. And that was where I think it got most tedious for me. And I agree with Ebert. It's clearly just, you talked about, like Lucas read Joseph Campbell and then made Star Wars, or he read Joseph Campbell and saw Buck Rogers, which is shown at the beginning of this film in a clip, and made Star Wars. Here you can definitely say like he read 1984 and Brave New World and then made this film. I mean, it's really just sort of expansion, not even expansion, maybe just kind of a riff on those themes and those elements to the point where it does feel derivative. But I feel like a lot of sci-fi of the 70s is like that. And it does fit in with those movies that Ebert, I haven't seen The Andromeda Strain, but especially Silent Running, which has very much this like lo-fi bespoke aesthetic to it and a kind of middling environmental message.
Yeah, I was talking about 2001 on those because that's the one I've seen.
Right, that's fair. And I actually really don't care for 2000.
But you know what I was thinking about, what film I was thinking about, one that Dave loved that you and I hated, was the Fellini movie. That prison sequence reminded me of that crazy prison sequence in Fellini's Island, Fellini's
Satyricon?
Yeah,
Satyricon?
That's what I got to on this. So,
well, Satyricon is like the opposite in that it's just it's very colorful and it's very excessive, and this movie is very minimalist.
Well, I was just saying the idea of imprisonment and the concept of hopelessness and hopefulness. It reminded me of that in those kind of weird spaces. So just leave me alone and give it to me.
Right. Well, no, I mean, I think Fellini might be an influence on this as well. I mean, you don't think of that as a George Lucas influence, but it's possible.
All right. Enough of your patronizing. Go to your next review.
Vincent Canby in the New York Times said, Lucas has made a visually hypnotic feature film out of his short, which, as I remember it, was a surreal chase through a computer-controlled city of the future. It is not, however, as either chase drama or social commentary that THX 1138 is most interesting. Rather, it's a stunning montage of light, color, and sound effects that create their own emotional impact. THX 1138 is practically an iconography of contemporary graphics, in which actors are intentionally, almost but not quite, indistinguishable from the decor. Lucas's achievement in his first feature is all the more extraordinary when you realize that he is 25 years old and that he shot most of the film in San Francisco on a budget that probably would not cover the cost of half of one of the spaceships in Stanley Kubrick's 2001.
Well, we all know Lucas never blew out a budget, so that's all good.
Well, nobody knew about that at the time.
No, it's all good. I mean, again, you're talking about the student film, and I'm like, that's really the only thing I would want to watch. I agree with you. The colors are awesome. I thought the chase was nice, but like I said, I was just really bored throughout this whole thing. So I think some of that got lost on me because I just kept going like, ugh, what is happening? Wait, do I have to watch that scene again? Because I don't understand any of this. And I just didn't vibe with this one at all, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you that a lot of this is boring and repetitive. And I think maybe Lucas is more on the Joseph Campbell wavelength than he is on the George Orwell, Aldous Huxley wavelength. And that is what is being demonstrated here, that he is not maybe the right person to make this abstracted social commentary piece, whereas someone else could do a better job of it. And I agree, like Canby is saying, it's not that it's an exciting chase movie. It's not that it's deep social commentary, but I just did really like the aesthetic. And that's why I was very intent on not watching the director's cut, which has been cluttered up with a bunch of modern CGI per Lucas's typical interests, and instead went to the Internet Archive and downloaded a version that I think is ripped from a Laserdisc from pre-2004 so that I could see, because that's one of the things I love about 70s sci-fi, and it applies to a movie like Silent Running too, is like all the little dials and video displays and blinking lights and stuff that was done in this very lo-fi way.
I agree. All that kind of real world practical effects stuff really adds to it. So I watched it online as well. I'm not sure which cut I watched.
If you saw the masturbation machine, you saw the director's cut, because that's not in the original cut.
Was that better or worse?
I mean, I didn't watch the director's cut. I did look up a very lengthy comparison, which is why I know that's the difference. I mean, we have the scene, this is getting ahead, but there's a scene where THX is watching these kind of holographic, I guess you would call them pornography. They don't seem very sexy, but things that arouse him.
Yeah.
And in the original cut, you just see him kind of in ecstasy and you can imagine what he might be doing. And in the director's cut, there's a CGI'd in like arm of some kind that seems to be jerking him off. So yeah. I feel like it goes to what Lucas, it's like, did you not get this? Let me put a big CGI blob in here to make sure you understand what's happening.
So we're unsure if it's better or worse for film, but it's definitely better for THX's dong.
Right. That's the most important thing.
Thank you.
So finally, Stefan Kanfer in Time magazine said, "The government, a wretched wedding of Mao Zedong and the Internal Revenue Service, treats each person as a consumer producer who lives to enhance the glorious state. If Lucas creates an eerie universe, he also implies a rather damning thought. Haven't we been here before? Indeed, we have in the constructions of George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, who use their views of the future to warn the present. Despite his scenes of bland horror, Lucas offers the 25th century as an arch, campy place, a conception not satiric enough to be accepted as comedy and not quite insightful enough to be taken seriously.
When you cut 18 million people off of healthcare to give tax breaks to billionaires, is that different than what we're talking about right now?
I mean, we're not quite at the level that the society is here in this film.
Are we that far away? Oh, you don't get healthcare, so you can give rich people more tax breaks. Rich people are more important. They run this whole thing.
I mean, to be fair, they seem to give everyone healthcare in the world of THX 11.
Well, no, they just put them on drugs the whole time.
Well, but hey, if you want to go on drugs now in our current world, you're going to have to get your insurance to pay for it, and good luck with that. But THX gets all his drugs delivered in a little,
it's not like he chooses. He's required to be on drugs, Josh.
I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying there's a difference there. So what struck me, though, about that review is like none of this to me seemed like satirical in the sense of being funny. George Lucas is not someone I think of as like having a good sense of humor.
As we learned when Jake Lloyd had all those quips driving in the first Star Wars prequel.
Yeah, not so much.
I mean, I will say that. I mean, American Graffiti's got some good humor in it, though. So again, I just... but that was at that time where he made this, and it's like it didn't do well, and I think Coppola or whoever was like, "Hey, write what you know," and he wrote like this homage to how he grew up, and that I think, in a way, to me, what I gravitate towards is like how personal that film is. Not saying that Star Wars isn't, but in a more realistic way.
Right, but I mean, in this film, did you see anything here as comedic or as satire?
No, I didn't see. I mean, this felt very, again, one note. The whole thing was just boom, 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 which is kind of how I felt about the prequels. And it bums me out because I don't know if we've talked about Duvall on the podcast, who I know I'm on record as saying is like one of my 3 to 5 favorite actors. And this doesn't showcase nearly what he's capable of.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised looking through that I don't think we have talked about him, even though he's had this insanely long career and has been in so many classic films. But yeah, I mean, I think this movie does benefit from having Robert Duvall and Donald Pleasence in the lead roles, as opposed to like George Lucas's fellow USC students, as you can see in the short, where they do bring something to create a character that you can somewhat grab onto. I mean, I think it's minimal, but it's more so than an actor with less of a presence would give it. But yeah, I mean, the dialogue kind of fades out a lot of times. A lot of this movie is just those actors staring off in the distance or being confused or whatever, and they don't have the chance to bring as much to the role.
Man, I don't think the dialogue is very good. I mean, and I think if you look at those first 3 Star Wars, especially the first 2, right, that's where the dialogue really kind of excels. So just to me, I just feel like there's a lot of misses going on this thing.
Yeah. So what is your story now?
All right. It involves you, Josh. It involves you. I don't even know if you know this. When I was in college at Boston University in film 3 or 501 that I had to fight to get into because I was only like a freshman or sophomore, even though I had done all my prereqs, our professor, Sabrina Zanella Ferrezi, which if ever there was a professorial name for a college, that's it. Who you would expect as like this kind of film professor, showing us like, La Jetée and, rules of the game and stuff. One week we did a film festival where you were allowed to bring in movies and she would bring in movies and you would bring in movies that you have made, right? And what would happen is they would play part of the movie and at certain points you would go hands. And if half or more of the class had their hands up, they would shut the movie off, right? So among other, she showed one of her movies, which was like basically Jay Sherman, I Love You, Prometheus, right? Like that type of, very kind of little, maybe too self-important thing. I brought in my movie that Josh co-wrote with me, which was 2 love stories that we made in high school. one featuring a dog and our friend Justin Vaughn dressed as a cow, and the other featuring Jake, our friend dressed as Janet Reno and his love affair with a blender. And that was the movie that we showed, and the class was into it, but she hated it so much that she yelled hands way more often than in other movies so she could shut it off. However, we did beat George Lucas's THX 1138 for second place, I think, in Best Other.
Best Other. Did she showed the whole feature or just the original short?
I think it was probably bits from the short. So
okay.
Yeah.
So had you seen the feature film otherwise?
No, I had not. So, I mean, I, after defeating it, I saw no purpose. No, I'm just kidding. So
that's crazy because that movie was like, it's not even it was a class assignment where we were supposed to make a music video. And we made it so long that we had to put 2 songs on it, I remember.
Yeah, it was Every Rose Has Its Thorn and November Rain. Not a short song either.
Like a 9-minute song. We just went way overboard. But there's no dialogue or anything. And we edited it. I think I edited it on 2 VCRs.
No, you did. I was there with you. But there was dialogue because at the beginning, Justin, who's dressed as a cow, was watching Telemundo and El Rey de Oros is on. And that's his favorite movie.
That.
So,
That's, you know what? I will give it to George Lucas over that. It was fun to make, but come on.
You haven't even seen it in 20 years, 30 years. You don't know. We'll do an
episode.
About.
We'll do an episode for Awesome Movie Year 1997 or whatever.
I wish I could find it still. That would be good. The point is we got railroaded out of the film festival. I don't mind losing, but let us lose on our own accord.
Sure. So that aside, I had seen this movie. I remember watching this movie on TV. I think when I was in high school, watching it on Bravo, when Bravo used to be like the arts channel, and being intrigued by this sort of weird artsy thing. And I might have turned it on, not at the beginning or at some point or something, and not even realized it was a George Lucas thing, and just wondering like, what the hell is this weird movie? So that my memory of it is being intrigued by its weirdness. But watching it now, from beginning to end, it was less intriguing to me. So Dave, had you seen this?
I had not. I actually thought that this was supposed to, I had heard about it as his debut, and I thought it was supposed to be some weird experimental thing without any kind of plot, almost like a long music video.
And it kind of is.
And it kind of is, exactly. Yeah, but I never knew until just recently that this was actually a movie with a story. So
yeah, I mean, and I think also the director's cut, which I assume is what you watched as well, Dave.
Yeah.
I think it also sort of streamlines a little bit, so the story is more apparent than it was originally. I mean, there is definitely, it's still a story. And looking at the comparisons, most of it is the same, but I think there's maybe some clarifications in there that Lucas wanted because, he's all about hand-holding the audience there, which maybe he wasn't at the time in 1971.
You don't need a handhold if you got a machine to do it for you.
True. That was, I really opened myself up to that one. So
speaking of opening yourself up.
Okay. All right. So I did find one of the interesting details here too, that extras, this was a very low budget film. Extras for this were recruited from Synanon, which was a drug rehab facility in the Bay Area. And at the time, I think was just that. And then eventually became a hugely violent.
Yeah, murder cult. Yeah. I think, stuff like True Detective season 2 might have had some, influences on Synanon. I'm sure there's some good podcasts to listen to about it.
Yeah. George Lucas, perhaps. I don't think had anything to do with their tipping over there, but you never know.
Yeah, maybe that's it. They saw the robots were going to take over the world and they're like, let's just murder everyone now.
Why not? So anything else you want to say about the background of this movie, Jason?
Wasn't Synanon a weight loss cult at first?
I mean, just from what I read, it was drug rehab that turned into a cult. But I don't know about it. There are multiple documentaries about it, but I haven't seen any of them. So I don't
Lucas named the film after his telephone number in college, Josh.
Oh, all right. I still use my telephone number in college for PIN numbers and stuff. So
what is it?
I'm not going to say.
Oh, okay.
I think that's probably lack of security here. You're tricking me, Jason, so you can access my bank account. I don't appreciate it.
Well, you're a freelance writer. Why wouldn't I want to get into there? Yeah,
that's fair. All right. Well, we'll come back and talk more of our general thoughts on THX 1138. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1971, we are talking about George Lucas's THX 1138, his debut feature, which Jason very much did not care for.
I did not like it all. I was like really looking forward to it. And like 15 minutes in, I was having trouble staying awake. It just was really boring. And then everything that I ended up rewatching was just as boring. There was nothing to grab onto here. Like you're saying, Duvall adds something. And I agree, Duvall's always going to add something. But there's really nothing to that character other than I get headaches, and stuff like that. And I didn't buy into the love story, which is underwhelming at best. And the whole thing, by the time they got to the chase, which is the most exciting part, I was ready for it to be over. So
yeah, and that's the part that is taken from the original short. So you can see that like maybe if his main idea was like, let's have a chase, and then he has to come up with something leading up to it, maybe he struggled a bit there. But I actually thought the early part of the movie was when it was the most interesting to me. And you're seeing, you're just kind of dropped into this world and you don't know exactly who's who and what's going on. And THX works in like this factory where we realize he's building the police robots, right? And it's very dangerous work where they work with like radioactive stuff. And I did like, if you want to talk about satire, the one amusing line was at one point there's a big radiation leak and an explosion and somebody gets killed in like the other section. And the supervisor for THX is like, oh, we've only lost 192 people in our section versus 245 in the other section. Keep up the good work. And yeah. I did think that was amusing.
I like that. And I thought the stuff where he was actually building the robot, that looked really cool. And I would have liked to have seen more stuff in that world. The beginning is a lot of that kind of like Big Brother is watching you state stuff. So it's there and you're kind of intrigued, but it's just, I lost interest quickly in that.
Right. Yes, clearly that was the case. But no, I mean, I thought that was interesting. And then I did like the idea that, his roommate, LUH, is trying to switch out the meds because she wants him to get out of his stupor. And that's why he has headaches and he throws up at one point while he's confessing to the like Jesus bot or whatever that they have in all these confessionals. And
I mean, that was kind of funny too, that the Jesus bot just like gave you like pats on the back, like, good man, you are doing right by society, that type of stuff.
It made me think of people who now go to like Chat GPT to help them with their problems.
Does that work?
I mean, there's all those stories about the Chat GPT like psychosis, because unlike the Jesus bot in this movie, which basically just says the same like three things over and over again, Chat GPT will respond based on what you say, and it encourages people's delusions, and it can be very bad. So,
like, can you give me an example? Because I need to talk to someone.
I would not advise talking to Chat GPT.
Well, I mean, that's who I was going to talk to.
Yeah, no, I would advise against that. Don't do that.
That's a bummer.
It's driven people to suicide and delusions of grandeur, and it's no good. Yeah, but I thought that this was sort of like prescient in that way, in that like the only option, I mean, the reason people turn to it is because they feel like they don't have any other option. And that's the only option here in this society where you can talk to the Jesus bot or whatever, and that's it.
One of the things I read were, and who knows if this is true, but the names were like kind of like symbolic: THX, sex, LUH, love, and SEN, sin. It was like, kind of very on the nose, but there's really nothing different. Like what did she bring other than like stealing his meds and and getting pregnant? Like there's just, and I'm not blaming the actor, there's just not much going on with like these characters here.
Right. I mean, and the whole sort of impetus for him being imprisoned or whatever is because he and La, who are meant to be roommates, even though, at the beginning it's like mate, and you kind of think, oh, is this some sort of arranged marriage like we just discussed in our Fiddler on the Roof episode, or people being assigned these relationships, but it really is just meaning like roommate or whatever. So they're definitely not supposed to have sexual interactions with each other,
because sex is outlawed, right?
Right. It seems,
but there are kids in this world.
But the kids are all, and there's something else. This is like a lot of the stuff is so vague, but especially like when THX goes on trial, they talk about how he was like natural born.
Right.
versus
So they couldn't kill him.
Right. Who was born in like a, test tube or whatever it is. And we see
Like
that
Dave.
some of that. So, so it seems like maybe at some point the society transitioned away from natural reproduction into this like scientific version of it where people don't, have sex in order to get pregnant. But what I'm saying is that the impetus for the whole persecution of him by this government is that he supposedly is in love with La and they have sex or whatever. And I agree with you. We didn't feel the like romantic chemistry or the passion or anything like that they would throw away everything so that they could be together.
Yeah. Again, like there was nothing for me to grab onto on this one.
All right. Well, that's the end of this episode.
Other than, maybe the machine grabbed onto it for me. Heyo.
Yeah. Jason, really, I'm glad that you watched the version with the masturbation machine because that was
I'd have no content.
Your favorite thing in the whole
No,
movie.
I mean, look, when I'm watching this, I'm like, man, thank goodness Blade Runner came out 10 years later, right? Which is like some similar themes. And even a much more amazing look. And that's not a knock on the look. The look of this is one of the best aspects of it. I just think we all like this genre. This, to me, I think is there are better versions dealing with similar, kind of, like I said, themes, aspects, styles, talking points of this that I would recommend over this.
No, and I agree with you. I mean, I think I appreciated this a little more than you did, but I agree. I mean, Blade Runner is a great example of a movie that does this kind of thing so much better. And I think Ridley Scott, as a director, is much more on the wavelength of this type of story than George Lucas is. But I thought, there were interesting aspects to this film. What did you think of Donald Pleasence's performance?
I mean, he's fine, but again, that like, is this character a good guy, a bad guy, no guy? He's like, oh, I had it switched so we could be roommates. We'll do very well together. You're clean. You know what I mean? Like there's just not much meat on the bone for him.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little weird, right? Because he is also doing something illegal by like messing with the computer system so that he and THX will become roommates. He seems really fixated on being THX's roommate.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been really fun, right? I know where you're going with this, and I would have been all for that. So, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, the color scheme is nice, like you're saying. I don't know. I guess the bigger point is like Lucas in two movies, in American Graffiti and Star Wars, I think you get like really good performances. In this, I don't have anything bad to say about the actors, and I don't want to, but like there's really not much for them to hold on to. And then in those three Star Wars prequels, I think you have some great actors who give really underwhelming performances, and that goes back to the director on those.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe in a way, Lucas is doing the best thing for him as a director of actors here by, minimalizing the amount of like emoting that these actors have to do or whatever, because he isn't able to get across what's necessary there. And, the society where everyone has been kind of dulled is the ideal location, the ideal setting for a George Lucas movie. I don't know.
I was going to ask you, because Lucas wrote the draft. Coppola wasn't happy with it, so he brought on Walter Murch, the legendary kind of sound designer and editor. They wrote together. They edited. Lucas would edit picture. Murch would edit all this like sound montages. Do you think this, like, where was this? I mean, who's to say where was it before he turned it in? Where else could it have gone? To me, again, this like just didn't get off the ground from the paper.
Yeah, I mean, and Murch, as much as he is legendary, is not known for being a writer. So I don't know exactly what he brought to like the story structure or whatever. I mean, I can say only having seen the short film, which has essentially no character detail at all, that, maybe there was some more specificity brought to the version that Murch worked on that Coppola, kind of helped guide or whatever, whether that's in terms of the plot or the world building or the characterization. I don't know. There's certainly more of that here than there is in the short film. And some additional, I mean, THX himself is basically like the only character in the short. I mean, they have a brief moment with his mate who has a different designation there. But other things like the Donald Pleasence character and more of the details of the world, the robots, all that kind of stuff is added for this version.
Dave, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with you. This movie's boring as hell, but I do think that the visual aspects of it make it like a worthwhile watch, and it's really interesting to just see what this guy kind of had in mind for what a movie like this could be, and I think it's done in a way, like you said, there's things that obviously inspired it. I think there's things that are obviously inspired by it, and it's very unique, and I like that about it. But yeah, it just drags on, and there's like barely a scene in here that is like necessary for the whole of the movie.
I mean, I think that's the idea, is that it's just sort of, it's not plot driven. It's just
Yeah.
sort of an impressionistic thing, which, again, is something that I often would like. So, Jason, I did want to ask about sort of the one other significant character in this film, which is the hologram guy, maybe?
Yeah, he is a hologram, man.
Is he? Okay, this is the question. Is he a hologram? Because like online and even on Wikipedia, in just the plot description, which is not meant to interpret anything, there's a question of, I think they call him a hologram actor. The idea that like the stuff that THX is watching early in the film, the porn, but also he watches some other stuff, that it is, it's a broadcast of like real people doing something that's holographically projected. And they're saying like this guy is a performer who is in holographic like shows. And other people even interpreted this as like a racial commentary. And I think it is pointed that like every single person in this movie is white except the hologram guy.
Sure.
Right. And the hologram actors or hologram representations. So that's got to mean something. And is it the idea that like somehow Black people in this society have been like, relegated to thinking of themselves as not real or something like that? Like, is there something going on there?
Well, I mean, the first question I would ask is at the end in the car chase, right? When Hologram Man is driving and he crashes and they go to look at the car, he's not in there anymore, right?
Right.
So if he's not a hologram man, what is he?
Right. Well, I mean, maybe he got out of the car. We don't know. But I mean, there's so many points in this movie where if he is a hologram, you're like, how is he doing all this stuff? Like he's as corporeal as THX, even to the point where there's the scene where they like pretend to be dead bodies and they get stapled with some little tag on their ears and the tag staples onto the guy's ear.
Yeah. These are deep questions that I had not considered. Is he a hologram man? I do like the aspect of like especially right now. I mean, you can look at what's going on in the world and like what race plays into everything. So I never considered it until you brought it to my attention. Josh, what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I do think if nothing else, the racial aspect of it is intentional, because if you look at the short, there are Black people as part of the like regular society. And so to have deliberately changed that, I think is something that Lucas is doing on purpose. Whether he actually has something to say that is meaningful about that, I don't know if I want to give him credit for that. And it seems like it's more people theorizing online about what this could mean. Maybe he didn't really think of it further other than like, oh, well, this is another dystopian aspect of society. You think of racial segregation as this dystopian aspect. Maybe that would be there too, without really thinking through what it means.
Josh, my question was so much more basic than yours. It was going to be, did the robot police remind you of the stormtroopers?
Well, yeah. I mean, the robot police more reminded me. I mean, they are kind
Blade
of
Runners.
Yeah. They more reminded me of the androids in the prequels, the ones they're always saying like Roger, Roger, and are sort of like hapless or whatever. There's the one scene where the robot policeman just keeps walking into a wall over and over again. And so I thought of that. But yeah, Lucas definitely loves these incompetent tools of the state or whatever.
Well, now that you mentioned that, it brings me to wondering about the connection between Hologram Man and Jar Jar Binks.
And that's not an unfair thing to make, is that, I mean, and what I was going to say too is like, it's not like Lucas has a good track record of racial sensitivity, when you look at the prequels. And so if he was aiming for like an early version of that, at least this doesn't come off as offensive. I don't know.
I mean, and I just think, whatever. Jar Jar Binks is a terrible character and obviously highly offensive, but I don't think that was the intention with that either. It was just a misstep.
No, it wasn't the intention, but I think it's a result of Lucas not having like self-awareness about how this stuff could look, in the
Misa no likesa.
Thank you. I did also like, if you want to label something satire, like the whole ending of the movie, the reason that THX is able to escape is because the operation to capture him goes over budget and they shut it down. I liked that aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. The ending is the Truman Show ending. No spoilers, but it's the same ending. So.
Sure. Yeah, that's a better film. I mean, I think you can point to, though, that this is influential. Dave, does this come up on piecing it together ever?
I really wonder that. I'll just throw out just real quick. One that I kept thinking about is Succession, which I feel like that show has to be inspired by this, as far as like this bleak future of everybody in this white colored office and just bleh the whole time. Like, and I'm in the minority. I don't like Succession, but it feels a lot like this movie.
Jason, did you think of that?
No, but I'm a little more offended that Dave's claiming he's a minority.
Yes.
No, I did not think of that at all. But again, who knows? But George Lucas, he has an overarching hand on pop culture.
Yeah, I mean, and Star Wars obviously is taken for granted as an influence on everything. But I think this movie, even if we don't care for it, or even if it's not entirely successful, I think it is influential. And I think you can put it alongside a lot of those 70s kind of downbeat sci-fi films like Silent Running or like Logan's Run or something like that, or even going to Blade Runner, that it's influential in a similar way.
Real Steel may have taken something from this. Sean Levy, director of Real Steel, is directing a Star Wars movie right now. There you go.
It all comes together.
Yeah.
Should we rate this out of 5 masturbation machines?
Oh, yeah. Sadly for me, it only gets 2 masturbation machines. So,
well, I feel like that's enough. I mean, how many do you need, really?
You don't know what I'm doing tonight. So
I don't want
no, the sad part is not the lack of masturbation machines, Josh. It's that I didn't like it any better. And it's a real bummer because, like I said, Duvall, like, I love him. I love Robert Duvall, and I just can't champion this film.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it 2.5 masturbation machines. And I do think it's worth seeking out if you are a sci-fi aficionado or just curious about Lucas. I think it's worth also finding that original cut, which is, again, we could talk about this as the legacy, but Lucas, one of his worst shortcomings is his insistence on erasing his own films. But it is a fairly readily available, even if it's not super high quality. So I'm glad I'd seen it, but I think it seemed like some sort of weird, intriguing glimpse into another world when I watched it on TV back in the day, and now it was just a little dull. So 2.5 from me. Dave, how do you rate this?
It's weird enough that I'm going to go to 3 masturbation machines, which, by the way, is enough for the 3 of us.
There you go. That's perfect.
Don't like it.
1 for each of us. Yeah.
I'm not in the mood anymore.
Yeah. All right, we'll come back and talk about
I have a headache. I think you guys took me off the medications that they're giving me.
I'm going to throw up here in a minute. We'll come back and talk about the legacy of THX 1138. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1971, we are talking about George Lucas's debut, THX 1138. And I mean, as I've been kind of harping on here, part of George Lucas's legacy as a whole is this obsession not only with tinkering with his own films and making changes, which I don't necessarily object to, but with going to great lengths to ensure that the earlier versions of those films are unavailable.
Well, I'll top you even beyond that. I don't know. Back in the day, remember Chris Hardwick when he was popular?
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't he write to you on one of the reviews you gave him?
Oh, when I reviewed his like stand-up special.
Yeah. That's right. So when he had Nerdist, I was listening to the Nerdist, and he said that he's been to Skywalker Ranch, up there in the Bay Area. And George Lucas has many movies that he's made for $5 million or so that he's never even released, that he's just like, yeah, I made a movie. I made another movie. Who knows? Maybe we'll get them someday. Maybe we'll never get them. Maybe he'll release them after he dies. I don't know. But it's like, that whole thing, obviously, like, I'm a huge Springsteen fan where he's releasing all these unreleased, like all this unreleased music. But that's a little different, a 2 or 3 minute song than a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, I mean, if he's really done that, that's crazy. But I mean, I think that stuff aside, the fact that these movies were released and yet he's trying to sort of pull them from circulation. Again, the only way you can watch the original cut of this is to find an old VHS or Laserdisc or to get it online. And I mean, and the same goes for the Star Wars movies. I mean, those are much more popular. So it's easier, I think, to find the original versions, because people are more interested. But now that Disney owns Star Wars, even then, he's somehow, whatever rights he retains or whatever, is able to hold that back from being released. And people are thinking like, well, maybe when George Lucas dies, we'll finally get a full release of the original cuts of the Star Wars trilogy, and maybe this one too. I don't know, but it just seems so anti-art to me.
Well, he's got such a strange career, right? Because he made this, and then American Graffiti, and then Star Wars. And then you figure, okay, I'm passing off Empire and Return of the Jedi. I'll be an executive producer while I go work on other stuff. But then he doesn't direct anything until those prequels 20 years later, right? He's exec producing and working on Indiana Jones and stuff like that. But it's just so strange. And then he hasn't made a movie since then either. So I'm really, it's kind of just one of the more baffling careers in Hollywood to me.
It is. And I think there are definitely points, I think, especially when he sold Lucasfilm to Disney in, I think it was 2012.
Which he seems to regret.
Maybe, but I know at the time he was like, oh, now I'm going to get back to I can get back to my indie roots and I can make these art house films. And he absolutely could. The guy is so rich that he could finance $100 million of some weird, he could do his Megalopolis, right? Speaking of Francis Ford Coppola, he could easily put his own money on the line to make some ambitious, weird thing that he wants to do himself, but he's never done that. He's far richer than Coppola, I think, at this point, and could easily have done that, but that just doesn't seem to interest him. I mean, the thing he's been working on for the last 10 plus years is this museum, the Museum of Narrative Art, that's actually, I think, supposedly going to open in LA in 2026 finally, but it's been, this boondoggle of various delays and whatnot. But, it just seems like he doesn't have interest in that. But maybe he does, as you're saying. If that Chris Hardwick story is true, maybe at some point he did go make some weird art house type movie and decide it didn't work and he didn't want to do it anymore. I don't know.
Maybe he'll put it in the Museum of Narrative Art, like Captain EO was at Epcot Center.
I mean, that would be cool, actually. I'm sure that would get a lot of people. I know, at the Studio Ghibli Museum, for example, in Japan, there are Miyazaki short films that you can only watch if you go to the museum there. And if that was the case with a Lucas movie, that would get a lot of people to go to that museum.
That sounds awesome, but not nearly as good as the Miyazaki Studio Ghibli amusement park. Do you know about that?
I mean, that sounds like a thing. That seems right.
But it's not like a real amusement park. There's no rides. It's like, here's a pole in the ground and you look through it and you see an image. So it's a totally weird, crazy, perfect for Miyazaki type thing.
Yeah. So I feel like this Lucas Museum will be less esoteric, but maybe he'll reserve a small space for one of his experimental films.
Josh, I'm going to bring up Robert Duvall, who I don't think there's ever been a better actor than, when I keep saying this, Cary Grant and Paul Newman and Robert Duvall. This guy blows me away, as I've said, probably on this podcast and certainly on Dave's. Tender Mercies, where he won the Oscar, is one of the best performances I've ever seen any actor perform in any medium. I would put his 70s against anybody's 70s, right? You got Apocalypse, The Godfather, Great Santini. As I told you, I love The Outfit. Network, he steals every scene he's in Network. Just an insane career. That's just one decade. I didn't even go over all the rest, but he's the best. There's nobody better than that guy.
And incredibly prolific. I mean, you have all those major films from the 70s, but he worked steadily up until at least 2022,
right,
when he was in a couple of Netflix movies that year. And he's 94 now, I think. And I don't know, maybe he's finally retired. But even if not, working into his 90s and doing good work, always a welcome presence in various films, whether the movie itself is good or not. So it is kind of a shame that this is the film of his that we're finally getting to first, but I'm sure eventually we'll get to something else.
We will. I mean, he's got an Oscar, a BAFTA, 4 Golden Globes, 2 Emmys, and a Screen Actors Guild Award. You know, I mentioned the 70s, but in the 60s, well, I think MASH was 1970, but he was in Bullet and MASH. And the 80s, you got The Natural, you know, just the 90s Falling Down, Crazy Heart after that. Just, you can go on and on. This guy, the best.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have sort of a soft spot for Donald Pleasence, primarily because he's in all the Halloween movies.
Right.
And he gets increasingly schlocky as he goes along as Dr. Loomis, the psychiatrist who is tracking Michael Myers over the course of all those films. And I think in part because of those movies, especially later in his career, he did a lot of like kind of cheesy, low budget horror, and, you know, some better than others. I mean, he worked with John Carpenter again on Prince of Darkness, which is pretty good. And some weird low budget movie I saw not that long ago called The Devonsville Terror, where it's one of those where like, okay, they clearly had Donald Pleasence for one day in one room and they made the best of it.
Yeah.
And I like that. But he did a ton of other stuff, lots of TV appearances. He was nominated for 4 Tonys for his stage work. And we did talk about him in our episode on You Only Live Twice, where he played Blofeld, the iconic James Bond villain.
Yeah, Dr. Claw.
Dr. Claw. Yeah, exactly. Right. Dr. Claw was certainly influenced by Blofeld.
Ian Wolfe, who's the old prisoner, who I did like in this movie. I found that maybe that's where the kind of Satyricon came in, like those kind of weird side characters. 400 movies, Josh, pretty good, including Mutiny on the Bounty, Foreign Correspondent, Saboteur, Julius Caesar, and Rebel Without a Cause. That guy did pretty well for himself. And you mentioned Halloween. Well, we should mention another horror icon. Sid Haig is in here, Josh.
Yeah, very briefly in here. Yeah. But I mean, not, you know, most of the other actors are almost, as that one review mentions, like they're practically just furniture in this film. Like they don't really get to make much of impression. But I do like Sid Haig, especially, you know, Rob Zombie made great use of Sid Haig in his films, like later in Sid Haig's career. And that's
I didn't realize how much blaxploitation he had done. I'd like to go back and, I mean, we like that genre, of course, anyway, so it'd be interesting to see that.
Yeah. The other like sort of substantial roles here, Maggie McOmie, who plays LUH. This was really her only like major feature film. She has a tiny number of credits, mostly in like short films over the years, and has done regional theater. Don Pedro Colley, who plays the hologram man, or is he? He was a very prolific character actor in film and TV. Had a recurring role on Dukes of Hazzard. Did a lot of stuff, and he, you know, he is a fun presence. Like you can get that he has some charisma there, that he's this, you know, whether he's a real hologram or a hologram performer, either way, he's like an entertainer in some way.
And some of the announcers who you hear but don't see include Scott Beach, very well-known actor, Terrence McGovern, and David Ogden Stiers.
Yeah, whose name they misspell in the credits. So that's good.
Well, that's good for me because I misspelled someone's name in my movie that's coming out right now. So I could just say it's an homage to Lucas.
There you go. You are just like George Lucas. I feel like we've talked about Walter Murch before, maybe when we did The English Patient. Legendary editor and sound designer, invented the term sound designer because of what he was doing was something that other people hadn't really ever done. He's won 3 Oscars. And made 1 movie as a director, Return to Oz, which is a nightmare fuel for children and is very fun.
You like it, I know that.
I do,
so, yeah. I mean, American Graffiti, The Conversation, Godfather. You know, he did a ton of stuff with Coppola, Godfathers, Apocalypse Now. The other person who we've talked about is the man with the music, Lalo Schifrin, who we know did Mission Impossible, Mannix, and scores for Cool Hand Luke and Bullet, and Enter the Dragon, plenty of stuff, Amityville Horror. So he did good.
Yeah, I mean, so many kind of like titans of 70s cinema here with Lucas and Coppola and Lalo Schifrin and Walter Murch and Robert Duvall, you know, all teaming up to not do their best work.
There you go.
Synanon. I believe there's like at least 3 docuseries about Synanon if you want to learn.
What's the best one?
I haven't seen any of them, but I think there's a Paramount Plus one and maybe an HBO Max one. They're all these like 4. I have no patience for these like 4-part true crime documentaries or whatever. But I think there are multiple ones there that you can check out. And the last thing I wanted to mention is, of course, the THX sound system, which if people have never heard of this movie, they've heard of that. You know, one thing George Lucas has been great at is, I mean, and maybe one of the things he focused on more than directing films is technology, creating this sound system that's in every movie theater still, or creating, Industrial Light and Magic, the, company that did special effects for practically, every major movie for decades, or Skywalker Sound, where all these movies were mixed. I mean, he, in that way, shaped the look and sound of films that weren't his, up to right now.
Well, I mean, genius, legend, influencer, provocateur. That's why we're interested in seeing so much more from him.
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen, but maybe someday we'll go to the museum.
One quick thing about sound design. The downward spiral from Nine Inch Nails starts with a sound effect from this movie that I recognize like immediately. It's that guy getting beaten. It's on like a video screen. And there's a guy getting beaten. It's like the first 10 seconds of the album is just that entire sequence.
What sound is that? Dave?
It's just a guy getting beaten over and over again.
What does it sound like?
Jason,
and it keeps getting faster and faster.
I did want to,
right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I love that album, and I'm sure I've listened to that numerous times, but I didn't make that connection. I definitely have. Speaking of Rob Zombie, like there's numerous times when I'll watch like old horror movies and realize, oh, this is a quote that was in a White Zombie song,
totally,
or whatever.
Yeah.
So
that's because you're more human than human.
I am. Yeah, I did just watch not that long ago, The Living Dead Girl, the film, which was also a popular Rob Zombie song. Anyway, really tying it all together there. Anything else you want to say about the legacy of this movie, Jason?
Watch out for the robot police or ICE.
Yeah, both of those things dangerous. So that is THX 1138, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can check us out online and on social media.
AwesomeMovieYear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or Jay Harris Comedy, and all the things. Go for Jason on Letterboxd.
You can find some old things from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I am at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And check out our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
It's our first feature episode that's not this episode, Josh, but hey, you know who else made a first feature? Speaking of George Lucas, 1971, some guy named Steven Spielberg. We're going to watch Duel.
So tune in next time for Duel, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.